Hi everyone, my name is Vidya Math and I'm an author and a poet, and I wanted to come and see you today because I would like to give you some pointers about how to write a sequel. So I have done a couple of videos before which tell you some details about how to write a book. And so there's a couple of videos about those. But today, what I would like to explore is if you've written a book, how do you then write a sequel? So, firstly, not every book needs a sequel, and that's fine. We don't have to then worry about having a sequel. But some books, and this could happen unexpectedly, they need a sequel. So, I've been in that situation where I've written a book and had no intention of any book having a sequel, but then have ended up on a cliffhanger and had to write a sequel. So for a sequel, what do we need to bear in mind? Firstly, if you're writing a series, which it will be a series, if you write a sequel, you might be writing a sequel or a prequel, then we need to think about the titles, because if they are part of the same thing, it could be a good idea to have some conformity with those titles. So, for example, I have a series called the Luminosity series. So, we have the first book in the series, which is called The Luminosity of Crystals and Dimensions of the Heart. And then we have a second book in the series, which is called The Luminosity of Energy. And you can see that they both have the word luminosity in there. And that kind of helps people to link the books together. So you can do that with the title, you don't have to, but it can also be quite cute and quite an important thing to do, especially if you're building a series. So say if I was to write yet another book in that series, even for me, it kind of helps me out to have, say, the word luminosity in the title. So we've spoken about the title. Then we come to actually writing the sequel. So for different books, I have books in different series. Each of those series are very different and they're written very differently. So when we make a sequel, it can be a very good idea to keep your writing style congruent with your initial book. And so if people have read your first book in a series and they are looking forward to a sequel, they are probably looking forward to a similar writing style and a similar kind of thing. So, of course, the story is not going to be the same because it's the sequel, so things will have moved. If it's a prequel, things will be what happened before. But the writing style, you can tune back into the writing style that you had. How do we do that? Sometimes, if you wrote a book in a certain place, if you were going to a certain cafe, or you were going to a certain park, or you were writing it in a particular place in your home, it's a good idea to revisit the same places and actually write your sequel in those places. Or you can have something with you that you used while you were writing the first book. So I write in a particular color of ink and a particular pen. In fact, the first book was written in 4 different pens. And to this day, I still have those pens in those colors. There's one that I use more than any other pen. And so when I'm writing books in that series, it's also a very powerful thing for me to actually use that particular pen. It's not still the same pen; it's the same make of pen. That the pen that I used initially ran out long ago, but there's that kind of thing. And then, as well as that, you can reread your first book and that is essential. Your first book is going to be your reference book for your sequel or your prequel. What happens is we write our books, and even though we may be the authors of our books, it is surprising as to how things change in our mind. Really, really important things, how they change in our mind. And I've heard this about memory. You watch things on TV, they talk about memory. You read things, they talk about memory. And memory is a very interesting thing. And memory doesn't necessarily give you what you might have written before. And I found this very surprising when I wrote the first sequel. It was very intricate. It had to be very intricate because the first book was very detailed. And I had to have a copy of my first book by me. And thankfully, I did reference to it. I did look certain things up. I was really blown away because some things that were really key, I was convinced, you know, a certain object had been used in the first book, or a certain thing had happened in the first book, or a certain colour had been mentioned in the first book. And when I actually went back and looked at details, they were not a million miles apart, but they were different, and those differences matter. So writing a sequel, what I found, is intensely difficult. So writing a book, in any case, is no easy or simple matter. But writing a sequel, I was really surprised as to how much more difficult writing a sequel is than writing the first book. Because with the first book, you have a blank sheet almost. It's not quite that simple, but it's the first time you're visiting the characters, the places, the everything that goes on. The sequel, prequel, they have to match up, and they have to match up seamlessly. You can't be quite as creative as you were the first time round, and that is an onerous task when you're having to refer back. As the material grows, you then have to be very careful, even in your sequels, that you've kept things consistent. And this, sometimes you might have very big books, and that is not easy to do. You could proofread your books that you've written, say 4 times, and the 4th time you might actually find, oh my goodness, something doesn't line up. So these are tips that I'm giving you so that you're aware, if you set out to write a sequel, some of the things you need to be aware of. Then what happens with finishing the sequel, and what happens with the series of books? How many books are going to be in your series if you decide to do this? Each series will tell you that yourself. So, no, itself, not yourself. Each series will tell you that itself. So it's almost like we don't tell the books how many books there are going to be in the series. The series tells you, and you will know that. So say you come to the end of your sequel, you will get a feeling about whether there's a next book or whether there's going to be a prequel to the first book. The series will tell you. And so go with that feeling. Don't force a sequel. There are some books you might write where there's only ever going to be one book in that series. That's absolutely fine. There are some books that you write where you may not expect, but you might end up having 4 books in the series, and you never even set out to write one. So let the books kind of do their magic with you. And what else is good to tell you about a sequel? So the sequel is going to be, yes, a lot more work than the original. will have to match up to the first book, and then it has to do the first book justice. And this is a difficult thing. Say you've written an excellent first book in the series. The second book is going to have to match up to that. And so how do we actually deal with that, or make it happen that we can recreate an energy and a proficiency in our writing that matches a masterpiece that we might have written already? So we tune into, this is a suggestion, and there may be different ways of doing it. We reread our first book so that we can get into the essence of the series. And then we take it from there. We go back to that world. We go and live in that world. We go and live in that essence. We assimilate that essence, and we allow that essence to guide us. What time was it set in your first book? We go back to that time, or we go forward to that time. Or if it's present day, say your series has moved on from, you wrote the first book 6 years ago, and 6 years on, your characters have moved on to, say, 6 years. They may have moved on to a different time. Then we go to that time. We think about it, and we feel it in our hearts. We feel, okay, so where are the characters at? And we keep that essence in line with the characters, but the characters may have developed. And so we keep the essence, but then we allow the development. And that sounds so hazy. So if you have any questions about it, then drop me a line in the comments. And I don't always get a chance to, I want to look at all the comments, and I want to answer everyone. But it doesn't happen as much as I want to. It doesn't always happen. But if you do post a comment, hopefully I'll come across it at some point in time and be able to answer your questions either as a reply or in a new video. So I've given you a little bit of information about writing sequels. I hope it was useful. And I am also going to wish for you that you are having a beautiful day, and that you have good things coming into your life, and that you have a good feeling in your heart. And I'm wishing you lots of love, and I'll come back and see you soon, either to do a reading, or to show you some swans, or to give you some more tips about writing books. So thank you so much for watching the video, and have a good day. Bye.